Onde tem cultura, a Vale está. No poder criativo que nasce dos palcos, orquestras, das artes, das ruas e dos museus. Na valorização das diversas identidades brasileiras e na preservação de memórias. É valorizando a cultura que crescemos e evoluímos juntos. Instituto Cultural Vale.
Eu sou um livro que você não deve julgar só pela capa, porque sou feito com papel pólen natural desenvolvido pela Suzano. Em outras palavras, seus olhos ficam mais confortáveis e o planeta também.
Ministério da Cultura e a Associação Casa Azul apresentam 22ª Flip, Festa Literária Internacional de Paraty. A Flip conta com benefício da Lei Federal de Incentivo à Cultura, PRONAC 235060, e possui acessibilidade para pessoas com deficiências física, visual e auditiva. Tem patrocínio Master, Instituto Cultural Vale. Patrocínio Ouro, Itaú, CCR e Suzano. Patrocínio Prata, MAC Móveis, Eletronuclear, O Globo e Sesc. Patrocínio Bronze, Sebrae e Globo Livros. Parceria institucional, Prefeitura de Paraty, Secretaria Estadual de Turismo do Rio de Janeiro e Museu do Território. É uma concepção Associação Casa Azul. Realização, Ministério da Cultura, Governo Federal, Brasil, União e Reconstrução. Obrigada e boa mesa. Flip, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
Eu sou caiçara daqui de Paraty, né? Nascido e criado aqui, de família da parte da minha mãe, toda de caiçaras aí. Então eu tenho esse legado, né, de trazer uma arte com viés mais de uma mensagem mais ecológica, mais cultural, né, mais ancestral, né? O que mais me traz a sensação de liberdade, além da pintura, é andar de bicicleta. Assim, você com o seu corpo, a sua máquina, né, e não existe o seu combustível, é a sua energia. Eu chamo minha bicicleta de bike ateliê, inclusive, né, porque a minha relação com a bicicleta ela é tão antiga quanto a minha relação com a arte, com a pintura. Eu acredito que a arte ela é a prova de que o ser humano ele se desenvolveu no planeta, né? É o processo de desenvolvimento da evolução humana mesmo. Eu digo que você pintar uma paisagem ao ar livre, você está absorvendo, né, as cores e o ambiente com o seu próprio espírito, né, com os seus próprios olhos. Você não tem uma referência, aquilo sai diretamente dentro de você. Então é um trabalho 100% humano, né? Não existe uma influência, né, de uma tecnologia, alguma coisa do tipo. É uma coisa espiritual mesmo.
Flip, O encontro da literatura com a cidade.
City, a town.
Boa noite.
Good evening. Good evening. It's beautiful, this auditorium, full of authors also to listen. So before we give this introduction to the roundtable, after this roundtable, there's an extra roundtable, which is we did with Chay Shurui and Pablo Casella to discuss the emergency with the wildfires in Brazil and are still threatening the country even more, so I invite all of you to participate in that roundtable. So we have Édouard Louis, this great author who has won the hearts and minds of Brazilians all across the country. It's a roundtable about the transformative power of literature, amongst many other things. And to interview Édouard Louis, I'm going to call Paulo Roberto Pires, who's a journalist, professor at the Federal University in Rio de Janeiro, editor of Serrote magazine. He's a person that's one of the few people who has been in every edition of Flip, of the 22 different editions. So we're happy that it's here on the screen to chair this session. So Paulo Roberto Pires, please come forward. Good evening, one and all. I'm going to call Édouard Louis. Please come out onto the stage. Great. Good evening, one and all. Thank you for coming. This long-awaited conversation with Édouard Louis, whom I thank on behalf of Flip for having accepted the invitation to come to Paraty to meet his Brazilian readers. It began yesterday, walking out on the streets. Without being able to walk, he was stopped at every turn to take selfies. It was a big party out on the street, so Flip has already begun since yesterday for him. Before I introduce him, I would like to remind you that you can send in your questions in writing here inside the tent, and you who are in the auditorium out on the town square, after which, after this roundtable, Édouard Louis will be autographing his book. In 2014, Édouard Louis debuted in literature 10 years ago. He was 22 years old, and he had written a book, a disconcerting book called The End of Eddie, published here by Tusquets, with a translation by Francesca. In the frontispiece, in 200 pages of real story of Eddie Beleguer, raised in a poor area in the northern France, where he grew up in a situation which you could call helplessness, affective and social helplessness, abandonment, violence, and homophobia set the tone. Can you hear? Okay, okay. Pardon. Okay, sorry. Violence and homophobia set the tone for his relations with the world and also with his parents and his siblings. The home is not a safe place, safe from bullying that he suffered on the street and at school. His father drank too much, his older brother was an alcoholic, his mother suffered full-time, and she reproduced the violences in suffocating circle. He wants to flee far away and to build for himself a new life. The book marks the end of a person as presented to the world. The book is a kind of birth certificate of his new life. Eddie saw in the school and in theater a path to break radically with that life. Eddie soon would leave home to do his secondary school study and be the first to enter the university. His family in the École Normale Supérieure, an institution of the French intellectual elite where they studied Sartre, Ramon, Jacques Derrida as well. Halancourt, this town, Amiens, the capital of Picardy, and then Paris. He moved to there. He changed the horizons, the desperate horizons of his family and friends for a writer's career. And he changed clothing, he changed his way of walking, of speaking, of eating. He changed his teeth and his body, and he changed in the notary public his name. Édouard Louis is the son of himself and his transformation. Okay, for instance, he's published 10 books, 5 of them, including The End of Eddie, had his family is the main motif. Who killed my father from 2017? Part of the father's story, of course, accident work. He was killed in a work accident, and his fate, other workmen massacred by the social benefit cuts in the policies, which you know quite well, for downsizing the strength of a woman in 2001, and a woman's battles and transformation. It's been published in Brazil. Monique se liberta. 2 moments when his mother breaks, Monique breaks with the circle of submission and violence which had victimized her. Last week, last Friday, they published in France Le Fondement, which the translator of the other books in Todavia translated this as The Collapse. And Louis narrates the story of his older brother, who died at 30 years of age, the victim of severe depression and alcoholism. 2 more books tell his story with the world. The History of Violence from 2017, which was his 2nd book. He narrates a rape and attempted murder that he suffered in the beginning when he was living in Paris, to change method from 2021, narrating this process that we're going to be talking about this evening. In addition to this cycle of narratives, Édouard Louis organized in 2000 a book in homage to one of his references, Pierre Bourdieu, called Pierre Bourdieu in Submission as a Legacy, and a collection that he directs for Presse Universitaire de France, an important publishing house. He published a book called A Dialogue on Art and Politics, a transcription of talks with Ken Loach, which we know quite well from films like Me, Daniel, Blake, Land and Liberty. And he published further At the Root of Violence, which is a theater adaptation of the story of violence, signed by Thomas Ottermeyer, the German director. But more amazing, this volume of work is the intensity and quality of these books with regard to literature, but also politics. And this at a moment when there are many intellectual writers who are protected in the consensuses or even in silence in the face of common issues common to France and Brazil. The crushing by the dominant classes, the brutal increase in social inequality, adherence to neoliberal global policies, violence, the far-right normalization of prejudice, racism, and homophobia. So, beginning, therefore, in a woman's battles and transformations, they said that literature should never sound like a manifesto, a political manifesto. Nevertheless, each of my senses based on I sharpen them like a razor or a knife. How did you change your path in making your story, that of your family, and turning it into more than an autobiography? It's an autobiography as well, but a narrative which is opened up to the world, which has this striking intervention in the world. I think it would begin with that, if you please.
Merci. Thank you to everyone. Merci à toutes les personnes qui sont venues ce soir. Je vais commencer par lire un extrait de.
I'm going to start by reading Changer la méthode,
qui a été publié par Todavia,
which was published by Todavia for some time.
Il est minuit 33 et je commence à écrire depuis cette chambre.
I've been writing from my book
dehors,
outside. Through the open window, I can hear the voices and the police far away. I'm 26 in just a couple of months. Most of the time, my life is in front of me, that nothing started, and therefore I've been living for many years with the impression that I have lived too long. I can imagine that this is why I need to write. It's so deep, as a way of fixing the past in writing, and therefore I can get rid of my past. Or maybe, Quite the contrary, that the past is so written in me that I have to talk about the past all the time, at every occasion, and that it has gained. I can only get rid of it, and I end up reinforcing its existence. Maybe I am in this trap, I'm not sure. I was 21, and it was already too late. I had lived already too long. I have known destitution, poverty in my younger years, the repeated sins of my mother that asked me to knock on the neighbors or my aunt, pleading for maybe a little bit of pasta and tomato sauce, that I was out of money, and that maybe a child would be able to get more than an adult. My cousin who died in prison, my grandfather died, alcoholic, and he was drunk from the very morning. My mother that will deny and try to protect her son, and she would always swear it would be the last time, and then he would say, I will never drink again. The brawls in the village, racism, the obsessive rural community racism, present in every word, in every sentence, saying it's not France, we're just Africans, we see foreigners everywhere. The constant fear of not, living until the end of the month. I didn't have enough wood to heat my house. I wasn't able to fix my shoes. I don't want my child to be embarrassed in school, and my father sick. My father sick for the work he had done in a factory, in the production, and then he was just sweeping all the waste that other people would throw out in the streets. He understood that his life was just a reproduction of the life of his grandfather, his father, his son, his grandchildren. Privation, leave the school at 14, work in the factory, get sick and die. When I was around 26, 27, I would look around me and I thought that their life would be my life, that maybe one day I would go to the factory too, like they did, and then I will just have to bend my back, and I would also have to submit to that. I was able to evade this destiny, and I became a salesperson in a bakery. I also was a secretary. I was a private teacher. I was a secretary. I was a prostitute. I was a monitor in a summer camp. And just for a miracle, I studied in a school that was considered one of the most prestigious schools in Europe. And I left with a diploma in philosophy and sociology. And in my family, no one had ever studied. I read Plato, Kant, Derrida, Beauvoir. I was able to know the most poor classes in France, the north of France, the petite bourgeoisie of Provence, its bitterness, and then the life of Paris, the French bourgeoisie and international bourgeoisie. I have frequented the most rich people in the world. I made love with men that had Picasso, Monet hanging in their walls. And they only traveled in private jets and will pass their time in hotels where one single night would cost what my family would make in a full year of wages for a family of 7 people. I was very close, physically at least, to aristocracy. I would have dinner with dukes and princesses. I ate caviar, and I would drink rare champagnes with them. I would get past some vacations in Switzerland and mansions in Switzerland. I knew the life of drug dealers. I loved a man that loved railroads. I loved one that was only 30. He has spent 1/3 of his life in a prison. I have slept in the arms of another one in the most dangerous outskirts of France. But over 20 years, I changed my name, I changed my first name, I changed my face, I redesigned the structure of my hair. I went through many surgeries, I reinvented the way I move, the walk, speak. I made disappear the accent I have from the north of France. I tried to flee to Barcelona to restart my life there with a failed aristocrat. I lived in a little tiny studio in Paris. I had also a big apartment in the richest neighborhoods in New York. I walked alone through the United States and the middle-class cities, and I tried to undo what my life had become. When I went back to see my mother and my father, they didn't know what to say to me. We didn't speak the same language. Everything that I had lived in so little time, everything I had gone through, everything would separate us.
Obrigado.
We know now, all of us know that who we're talking about and who we're talking with. The portrait that you make of your father and your mother and their behavior, your parents' behavior, shows a dual complementary. He was very violent, she was submissive, and in turn violent as well, your mother. And at the end of Eddie, you have a kind of mirror of them in your older brother and your older sister. I would like for you to talk about these ideas of masculinity, masculine and feminine, and how you looked critically and viewed critically these two positions, and to understand that this was your feminine, but it was far behind your feminine. It was opened up. This opened you up to the world.
Oui.
Yes, I was made aware of the difference between what was male and female, masculine and feminine, especially because as a young gay person, and I was always considered as a type of crime in terms of against masculinity. So I was against the idea of masculinity, as if I was committing a crime, as if we're not, if I was not a man, I would hate something in others. And people would say, well, what's wrong with him? Why were they so bothered by the way I spoke? Why do we hate other people? Why don't we respect their ideology, the whole mythology of masculinity? All of a sudden, I was confronted with this idea, and I lived in a world that was a world that was fully structured by male dominance. It was almost an obsession. We always talked about what it is to be a true man, what it is to be strong, and it is a world in which even the relation between social classes was a relation between male relations. In my infancy, to be a man, a true man, you will perform your man's identity. It would be to go against the bourgeoisie that was like femininity, because they would cross their legs in certain areas, they would eat little portions of food, they would maybe kiss each other, but we would only shake hands, for instance. So it was interesting to see that with the male dominance, we can completely rethink the whole idea of social class. And this is what I try to do in my work, is to take into consideration this male dominance issue, to try to re-say everything that is said with regards to class domination. There's something with regards to my mother and my father, and with regards to what you say, there's something that interests me in what I try to tell. And it's a bit what I tried to say in terms of the paradox of domination and the fact that everyone that was dominant in my infancy from the standpoint of your gender, because they would be the incarnation itself of masculinity. My father, my grandfather, my brother, everyone is destroyed. My father is 50 and he can't walk, he can't breathe. My brother at 38 was died 2 years ago. And those that were the most dominated, women, my mother, my sister, and myself as a gay person, we were able to flee, to escape from all this. And this is what I'm interested in seeing, to try to understand to which extent what will destroy us at a given moment can be the same thing that will free us at another minute. Sometimes violence is not a snapshot, it's not static. It is a movement. Domination is like a river. It's something that will change, that will be sort of a dialectic. And I will end with a very concrete example. The thing is, my father, during my infancy, when I lived this violence, when he received violence in his life, he was also the idea that this violence would be his own choice, as if he had chosen. He was saying, I drink a lot because I'm a man. I do dangerous things because I'm a man. I will confront the schooling system because I'm a man. It would be like a performance of a complete social disorder. So everything that destroyed my father, or even my brother, these are things that they thought that they had chosen to do. However, my mother, as a woman, she never thought she had had a choice. It is my father that told her, you stay home, you have to cook, you take care of the kids, you do the cleaning, you're not going to work, you're not going to learn how to drive, and you will lay with me. She never thought that she had a choice. And one day she said, I'm going to take back what was stolen from me, because she never thought that she had chosen that. And to me, it's the same thing happened. I never thought I had chosen my life. I thought I was condemned to that life. And paradoxically, because I was more dominated than others, because my mother was more dominated than others, we were able to find this window. We were able to find the survival, and not my brother, not my father. And today I'm under the impression that when we talk about violence, we talk about this in a very simple way. What I try to do in my books is to make this violence analysis a bit more uncomplex, more simple. I try to understand it better.
You said that the impositions by males are devoted now. The ones that imposed on others, and the woman, the wife, and gays are able to, they change the course of the river that you talk about. Why is it easier for her to change? Why do you think that it's easier, and actually is easier for her to change?
Oui, beaucoup plus.
É mais fácil mesmo. It is easier for her. It is easier for her. But it's easier for her to change.
Parce qu'elle est moins libre.
Because she's
pas
not.
Parce qu'elle est plus libre.
Because she's less free and not more free.
Les livres que
My books, the books I write, are also books that will be confronted with a type of ideology that will go through this story of literature, movies, novels. The people that are able to escape were maybe freer than others, and this is why they were able to escape. This is something we see in the Rouge et Noir by Stendhal. This is a classic novel of social transformation. And when the book starts, Stendhal's book starts, the son, Julien Sorel, he's reading a book under a tree. So he's in the branches. And the father, who is the man that is there working, he's cutting wood. So Stendhal, in a certain way, immediately makes this relation, a duality between someone who was free and the other ones that are not free. And the whole literature is transversed by this type of dichotomy. You know, mainstream cinema is the same thing. Like the story of a boy who is free in a world where others are not free. It is a child that is more sensitive to things and others are not. So I tried to pulverize this narrative. I tried to create another narrative in which I'm able to tell that we are able to escape because we are freer, because we have no choice. And I was able to escape because I had to reinvent myself because I had no other choice. And my mother, the same thing, she had to reinvent herself because she had no other choice. And so, at the same time, the absence of freedom is where the possibility of emancipation comes from. This analysis is not an analysis we produce every day in terms of social determinism against freedom, which is a very innocent and silly opposition. What interests me is the opposition, not determinism against freedom, but it's to think about the social forces that will impact male dominance, homosexuality, class, racism, friendship, love, for instance, and to see how all this structure that will make a life will be confronted one against the other and then produce freedom. It's not an additional freedom. Literature was always extremely violent because I will always ask myself, I was not more intelligent my sister, more sensitive as my sister, and the people would say that, oh, because you did literature, because you're more sensitive to these things, you are more understanding, but it's horrible to think something like that, and it's not true, it's not true. I was not more intelligent or sensitive than my sister. It is this friction that produced this, and it's the same thing with my mother. And this is probably why there is the story of male homosexuality and women that sometimes we see in the different stories. We see all the stories of gay men and women. We see this friendship between them because actually it's a type of a community of a metamorphosis between women and gay. And this is what my mother was able to...
You say that... Okay. Just a second. Concerning Monique, you say that all the metamorphosis, all of this process occurs based on an encounter. And in your own transformation, there are two important encounters. The first with a classmate, Hélène, in Change Method, you live with a bourgeois family to see another world, and you have contact with this bourgeois family. And Didier Rebon, the sociologist and author of Return to Hans, which is published by Aine in Brazil, and you attend a conference, a lecture by him, and you didn't have idea, and she summarizes the book for you in a way that it's very quick, and I'm going to read the summary. You summarize it as an abstract of your books. He told Didier Rebon that he had been born in a lower-class family in northern France. Afterwards, he became an author and intellectual known all over the world, and he used his own life and his own career, his passage from one extreme to the other of the world as raw matter to think about poverty, violence, and class violence. Didier Rebon's books isn't like any other intellectual books, and I read this, and it's like I'm reading your books. At some stage, did you see in Didier and the Return to Hans the path that you would follow, literarily, and not just literarily, but existentially as well?
Oui, c'est la rencontre avec Didier.
This is the meeting between Didier and his work and his book, and as you said, this meeting between Elena. What is strange is that this has produced a type of mistake. I was wrong. I remember the day that I went to do the conference at Didier Rebon, where I do in Change. Didier is in a conference room such as this, and he tells that he's in the middle of a lower class blue-collar worker community, and he had left to Paris, and he started studying, he started writing books, and he would meet intellectuals, and he was friend with Pierre Bourdieu, Marguerite Duras, and Pierre Foucault, and all this transformation made him become distance from his family. And I remember that when I left Didier's conference, he was estranged from his family. So, and I said, when I read it, and I said, this is the story of my family. And actually, it was not the story of my life. I didn't go to Paris, I didn't write books, I almost never read, I didn't get to meet Marguerite Duras, she was dead by then, and it wasn't really the story of my life, but I did believe it was. And strangely enough, it is this terror that gave me the energy to transform myself. There's this poet writer, Denise Riley, and she says, identity is a ghost. Identity is a way in which we will invent something that we're not. And in becoming a ghost of what we are, might be something that we will become. So these books that will talk about this change in transformation, the wish of transformation, And the resistance that is produced in society is a result of this desire of transforming yourself. When you want to transform, everybody will say, well, who do you take yourself for? You're not yourself. Do you think you're better than we are? Do you think you're superior to us? This is what we're confronted with. And so, as if there was a form of, it was almost a crime, as I said again. You know, if I don't stay in my place, I'm committing a crime. If I try to become something else that society would not allow me to be, that's it. So this meeting with Didier created this sort of fundamental mistake. But this mistake was my freedom at the end of the day. And this is why, I'm sorry, I'm thinking about another thing here. That's the same thing that change talks about. What are we entitled to become? Are we entitled to become something else? Or we have the right to be ghosts of everything? So we don't all have the same rights when given a limitation. When I thought about Didier Ribon, I came from a lower class environment, and I wanted to become like Didier. I started to read books. I started to become more interested in culture and literature, and all the children of bourgeoisie with whom I was studying, they have always read, gone to the museums, they all participated in conferences, and they all say, who do you think you are? You play this role, you're not yourself, you're not natural anymore. You're trying to copy us. You want to become like us, you're imitating us, because you were so well before in your life. But actually, to imitate their parents, their parents didn't go to museums, they were just imitating their parents because they come from a privileged environment, a privileged family. So this allows us to ask ourselves, who has the right to a true limitation? There is no authentic person. There are those who imitate, who copy, and there are those who have the right to imitate and those who have not the right to imitate. And this brings me back to the whole idea of gender. Right. Oh, please, do not applaud. It's true. There is Judith Butler. She says gender is a limitation of a limitation without a model. So there's no model, there's no Bible or a handbook that will say to be a man is this, to be a woman is that. But every day, even though unaware, we have someone who has copied someone who has copied someone who has copied someone else. So a transgender person was born, so to speak, man, and then will perform as a woman. Society will try to destroy that personality, saying you do not have the right to do that because you're imitating. It is not your role. It's not your place to do that. And all the others are also copying someone else. So it's an imitation of an imitation of an imitation of an imitation. They don't know how to behave. They have to just imitate. They don't know if they're behaving of a man or a woman. I'm being a bit long here in my answer, but I guess we have to think about this opposition of what is a legitimate copycat and an illegitimate copycat. So I am an illegitimate copycat, and I invite you all to also become an illegitimate copycat.
You say, right, that Didier Ribon would produce, I'm quoting, would produce inadvertently a painful break, the most painful break in my story. Did the same thing happen with you in another position in this relationship? If after a lecture by you or an encounter like this or an interview, somebody came to you, like you went to Didier Ribon and talked to you about their concerns like you talked to him. It might be happening now, here at this moment from the audience out in the town square. Somebody reading the book is going to ask for your autograph. And I would like to know if have you experienced this other position, because in a trailer of a documentary done on what's called Édouard Louis, The Transformation, François Caillat's documentary, you say, whenever somebody says, I change, there's the possibility that someone will say, I want to change.
Oui, je pense que la scène la plus belle que
I guess the most beautiful scene I have witnessed. One day I was in France, I was in France, and I was presenting the book called A Woman's Battles and Transformations, and I tell how my mother left my father after 20 years living with him. And one night, my mother, after 20 years, she was living with my father. As I said, my father told her that she had to do all the cleaning and cooking, and my mother, she couldn't take it anymore. But she was unable to leave. And then one day, all of a sudden, she did. She got all her things together. She got all my father's stuff, and she threw all her stuff out in a trash bag. And he said, don't come back. And they separated there. And then one day I was presenting this book in a bookstore in France, and a lady came to me and said, I read your book and I did the same thing. I left my husband, I threw all his stuff out, and I threw it out the window, and I said, just don't come back. So my husband, I couldn't take it anymore. He was mean to me. And so when I read your book, I felt the same thing. I wanted to leave. And so I was really touched by that, to see that a woman used what I said, and someone used my book as a handbook, almost. It was almost a handbook of escape route for her. So certainly this was one of the most important things, the most moving things that I have ever witnessed. And another thing that was quite interesting also was that in Spain there is a foundation that was created called Fundación Edi. It is a foundation that will give free apartments to LGBT people that were chased from their families, were expelled from their families. And when I presented my book in Spain, I went to lesbians, the gay people that were expelled of their families. There was this boy that was half burned by his father. And so they had a place where they could hide and escape. And to me, this is important because when you write the story of your own escape, many people want to condemn you, and there are others who want to come to me, and you say, you won't change the world, you're saying you escape. Of course, I would love to change the world, but I am unable to. But actually, what is interesting, what I mean is that this opposition is interesting because each time, as you were saying, each time that we try to escape, each time we say, I will change, we see the possible transformations, and we show other people in other minds and other lives how to change. It's what Patrick Chamoiseau tells, or Toni Morrison in his book about enslavement. There was at a given moment during slavery in the United States, there was those who escape, and every time they would escape would allow other people to think, maybe not possible because sometimes they were caught, but each escape will allow others to think that it was possible to escape. So it was this whole chain of escape that were organized by a structure. And there's also structures that, but each person that will try to escape will make other escapes possible. And you can never try not to escape. We cannot escape from escaping. Jean Deleuze, you would say that we make these little holes in the bucket, and that's where the water starts dripping little by little.
In the first book about your mother, The Battles of a Woman and Transformations, talk about the trajectories. Yes, a trajectory, a life story of inadequacy, of how people change. This is a reason in all motif in all your books. I would like to use my new life as revenge against my childhood. I was becoming a class deserter, a social class, for revenge and this violence. It was against everyone. Everything was added to all those that I'd experienced. I'd like you to talk about the role of rage and revenge in your writing, because it's apparently, this is heavily loaded in your books, and it's very important as well.
Absolument.
Indeed. This whole idea of revenge is something that I was obsessed about.
dans mon enfance,
in my
mes parents,
childhood,
ma famille, mes
my
frères et
parents,
sœurs
my sister, my
avaient
brother,
honte de
my
moi,
relatives,
avaient honte
they
de ce
were
que j'étais.
embarrassed. They were
Ma mère me
ashamed of
disait
me.
toujours
My
pourquoi tu
mother will
parles
always
comme
say,
ça,
"Why do you
pourquoi tu
talk
parles
like
comme une
that?
fille,
Why do you talk
pourquoi
like
tu
a
marches comme une
girl?
fille,
Why do you
pourquoi tu
walk
marches
like a
comme un PD,
girl? You
pourquoi
know,
t'es
you
pas
act like
normal, est-ce que
a
t'es
PD, a
malade?"
pederast, or like a gay."
Et je me souviens
Queer.
qu'à ce moment-là, je me
And I remember at
disais,
the time,
un
I
jour je
would
vais
say,
m'enfuir
well, one day I'm
et
going to
ma fuite, ce
escape,
sera ma vengeance.
and this will be my revenge.
Donc c'était un
So
sentiment
it was a
extrêmement
feeling that was
violent,
extremely
qui était un
violent.
sentiment
That was
de
a
se
feeling
dire,
of telling myself,
je vais leur prouver que je suis
I'm going to
meilleur qu'eux.
prove that I'm better
Ils
than
me
they
disent que je
are,
suis inférieur et moi je vais leur montrer que
and
j'étais
I will show that
supérieur.
I am
Et je
superior
me
to
souviens
them
comment,
in
quand j'ai commencé
escaping. And I
à faire des
remember
études,
when I started
à
to
lire des
study,
livres,
when I started
à lire
reading,
la littérature, à lire
and
des
the
journaux,
literature,
je rentrais chez mes parents le
newspapers.
week-end
I would
et
come back to my
je faisais
parents'
semblant
house
de lire
weekends, and
devant
I
eux.
would just pretend I was
Et
reading
je
in
voulais
front
leur
of them,
dire,
holding a
vous
book.
voyez, moi maintenant,
And I
je fais
want to
quelque
say,
chose
you
que vous
see,
savez
I'm
pas
doing
faire.
something that
Je
you
fais
don't know
quelque
how
chose
to
que vous
do.
pouvez pas
I
faire.
do something that you
Et
can't
je voyais que c'était
do.
d'une
And I would
violence
see that it
extrême.
was an
Ma
extreme
mère me disait, mais
violence. My
lève-toi,
mother say,
arrête de
come
faire
on,
ça.
stand up, stop doing that.
Et j'ai écrit aussi pour
And I also
donc
wrote
réparer à la fois la violence
to
que ma famille
try
m'avait infligée,
to
mais la
fix
violence que
the
moi aussi
violence
je
that
leur
my
avais
family did
infligée
against me, and also the
comme
violence
réponse à
I
leur violence. C'était
did
une forme
against
comme
them.
dans une
It
tragédie
was,
grecque
it's like a Greek
une succession
tragedy,
de
you know, a
violences qui
succession of
s'entremêlaient. Ma
violences
mère
that
était
are
violente avec moi,
meshed.
mon
My
père était
mother was
violent avec
violent
ma
with
mère,
me, my
moi j'étais
father was
violent avec
violent
ma
against
mère, et
my
puis il y avait une
my
sorte de
mother,
cercle
and so
dans
there
lequel
was
tout le
like
monde
a
était
vicious cycle where everyone was
prisonnier.
stuck.
Et si j'écris
And
aujourd'hui, c'est
if I
pour
write
comprendre
today, it's truly to understand
cette circulation
this
de la violence.
circle of violence.
Une sorte de monde dans lequel
We live in a world in which
personne n'était responsable
no one is
de la violence.
responsible
En
for
fait, la
violence.
violence,
Actually,
la violence, on la
violence,
conduisait
we
comme
conduct
comme un
violence.
courant
We guide it
électrique.
as
C'était
if
pas
it
des
were
gens
electric
qui étaient
current. It's
violents
not
et des gens qui
people
étaient
that were
violentés, mais
violent
c'était
and
une
people
forme
that suffered
de
violence.
violence qui
This
circulait entre
violence
nous.
is like circulating
Et pour
between
moi,
us
c'est
or
vraiment
among
la manière
us.
dont je vois
And
la
this
violence.
is how
Je
I
crois
see
pas du tout à la
violence. I don't
responsabilité.
believe
Je
in
crois qu'il y a jamais aucun
responsibility
individu
or
qui est
liability.
responsable.
There's no one single
Je crois à la
individual that
violence
is
comme une sorte
liable. Violence is a type
de
of
fluide qui circule
flow.
entre les
It's like a
corps.
fluid that
Il y a
will
un
circulate
roman
between
pour
different
illustrer cette
bodies.
idée, je
Just to
pense,
illustrate this
un des plus beaux
idea,
exemples, je vais
one of
essayer
the
de le
most
faire rapidement.
beautiful examples, and I'll
Un
try
des
to
plus beaux
do this
exemples de ça,
fast,
c'est le roman de
is
Toni Morrison
the
qui
Toni
s'appelle
Morrison's book
God Help the
called
Child.
God Help the
Un des
Child,
derniers romans de
one of
Toni
the last
Morrison,
Toni Morrison's
dans
books,
lequel Toni
in
Morrison
which
raconte l'histoire
she tells a
d'une
story
fille,
of
d'une petite fille
a
noire
daughter,
qui
a
naît dans une
girl,
communauté noire
a
des
black girl. She
États-Unis,
was born in a
dans
black community in the
laquelle
U.S.,
plus on est
and
noir
the
et
darker
plus on
you
est
are,
victime du
the
racisme,
more
y
you are
compris par la
victim of
communauté noire
racism,
américaine, par
including
les
by
blancs et
the
aussi par les noirs.
American black community,
Et un
for
jour, une
whites and
femme
blacks. And one
met au
day, a
monde une petite
lady,
fille,
uh,
et quand cette petite fille arrive
and
au
when
monde, elle a la
this
peau extrêmement noire,
lady
beaucoup
will
plus
come
noire,
back,
plus
she
noire
becomes
que sa
even
mère.
more, but she
Et la
is
mère, à
blacker
cause
than
de
her
ça,
mother, and the
elle va
mother,
humilier
because
la
of that,
petite fille pendant
will
toute son enfance.
humiliate
Elle va la
this
frapper, elle va
girl.
l'insulter,
She will
elle
hit
va
the
pas vouloir
girl
lui donner la
throughout
main
her
parce qu'elle
whole
a honte, un
childhood
peu comme mes
because
parents
she's
avaient honte
embarrassed.
de mon corps
She's ashamed,
homosexuel.
like
Cette
my
mère a
parents were
honte du corps
ashamed
noir,
of me.
trop
This
noir
mother
de sa
is
petite
also
fille.
embarrassed and
Et ce
ashamed
que
by
va faire la
the
petite
dark
fille un
body.
jour,
And so this girl one day,
c'est que alors qu'elle
what
va à
she does is
l'école,
when she goes to school, for
elle
instance,
va
one
faire
day,
croire à
she
sa
will
famille que son
allow
institutrice,
her
qui est une institutrice
family to
blanche,
believe a white
fait des abus
teacher
sexuels sur
would
elle. Et en
is
faisant ça, elle va
harassing her
essayer d'être
sexually.
regardée par sa mère,
And
qui
so
l'a jamais regardée,
she
qui l'a jamais
she makes her
considérée, qui l'a
mother
jamais,
look
qui l'a
at her,
jamais
this
aimée.
mother who had
Et
never
donc elle va
considered
dire,
her.
mon
She will say,
institutrice me viole à l'école,
my
me fait des
teacher
attouchements
is
sexuels.
raping me
Cette
in
institutrice
school.
va aller en
And
prison.
then this
Et grâce à
teacher
ça, la mère
is
va regarder sa
in
petite
prison.
fille
And all of
droit
a
dans les
sudden, the
yeux pour
mother
la première
starts
fois de sa vie.
seeing for the
Et cette
first time
femme,
her
quand elle va en
daughter. And
prison,
this woman who is in
10 ans plus
prison,
tard, elle ressort
10 years
et
later,
elle
she
essaie
will
de
leave,
tuer cette
and she
petite
tries to
fille
kill
qui a fait
this
croire
girl
qu'elle l'avait
that
violée.
allowed everyone to
Quand vous
believe that
prenez ce
she
roman de Toni
was a
Morrison,
sexual harasser.
elle vient d'où
So,
la violence?
where does
Est-ce que
the
la violence
violence
c'est la
come from?
mère?
Is it the
Est-ce que la
mother?
violence c'est le racisme?
Is it
Est-ce que la
racism?
violence c'est la petite
is violence the girl who created a fake sexual harassment complaint? Is it the teacher that will try to kill this girl that has no other choice but doing that? It's exactly this world in which violence belongs to no one. It's everywhere. It will circulate, and in a less violent environment. But what happened? This is what happens in my family. My father is a victim of the violence in the factory. He's violent with my mother. My mother is violent with me, and then I will be violent against her. I guess we discover the violence if we are able to analyze on this side everything. We try to find someone who is liable, someone who is responsible, accountability. I don't believe in accountability. For 1,000 years, we're trying to find accountability. We're just punishing those who are held accountable, and society can do nothing about this. It's essential when you talk about this chain of violence, this dispersed violence. It's essential when you say for dominant classes, in politics, it's just a matter of aesthetics. People say, oh, this or that ideology, will comment this about Brazil, polarization, this and that, and it's like a aesthetical distance. And then the dominated classes, political decision can impact their whole life, directly impact their life. And in your escape from home, you have you start joining organized political movements. So I would like you maybe to talk a little bit how this political awareness is created in you. It's not just a matter of being engaged in a certain party or having a certain ideology, but this engagement of those who suffer violence and not those who simply sitting there discussing if someone is liberal or not. Yes, indeed. It was not an intellectual reflection that produced my relation with politics. It was something very intimate. I was telling this on the book about my father, who killed my father. But in my childhood, we felt politics on a daily basis. And the politics for someone like my father or my mother was something as old as a first kiss, the first time we make love, your relationship with your children, with your son, with your daughter. It was extremely intimate. And I had these memories of my childhood. I had memories that were intimate. And I didn't have intimate memories of politics. We don't know the difference between right and left, conservative, liberal. I remember, for instance, at a given moment, all of a sudden, when government stopped to reimburse medication, which was previously paid by the government, and then all of a sudden, my father was no longer able to buy medication, drugs, and he had all the stomach ache, and then Shashahak said, we're not going to reimburse this drug anymore, and that's it. And so my father was unable to buy, and I remember the day that happened. I remember that my father said, I can no longer buy this drug, this medication. Because of Jacques Chirac, my father had stomach ache. And at that moment, I know nothing about politics. I knew nothing about politics. And at this given moment, there was this very serious reform under Nicolas Sarkozy. It was a reform of the minimum salary, the minimum wage. It was a small pension that we would give to people that were no longer able to work. And then one day, like all right-wing conservatives, like all those classes, Sarkozy said, if we continue to give these pensions, people will no longer work because they just want to they want to stay at home, they want to watch TV, they're just lazy people, and this and that and this and that. So at this moment, there's a total transformation in this pension, and this transformation meant that if you are unable to find work, in a couple of months, you will take out this pension that you receive every month. It was sort of an unemployment pension. And from one day to the next, the French would call my father and say, you have to find work, you have to find work, you have to find work, you have to find work. And so my father, who had issues on his back because he was a worker in this factory, and he was forced to work as a street sweeper. And he, that did away with his back pain. As I said, my father is 50 now. He can no longer walk. He has difficulty in breathing even. And then the government of Sarkozy said, either you find a work and then, or either you find work and, or you will die because you have nothing else to live with, or you go back to work and then you die also. So as I very often would say in the publication, would say to the public classes, either you die or you die. Either we do nothing or then you will die working. And maybe when this reform happened, I was, what, 8, 9, I'm not sure, maybe 10. I knew nothing of politics. And I remember that how this impacted my father. And this is the story this is the politics that I tell in my books, the story of a politics with a very intimate dimension of our existence. And this is almost, not totally, but almost absent of literature, because most people who write about literature, they are from the bourgeoisie, they are well-educated, and so they don't have the same feel. They did not feel politics in their bodies, in their family. And Macron can do nothing against me. I can leave France, I can pay my medication, I don't need the pension, I don't need unemployment pension. So Sarkozy and Macron can do nothing against me. They can kill my father, and governments can kill those that are dominated, but they can do nothing against me. So this excerpt that was very controversial in France, you will talk about the people who were responsible for the destiny of your father. I'm going to read it very fast. Hollande, Valls, Hirsch, Sarkozy, Macron, Bertrand, Chirac. The story of your suffering has a name. The story of your life is the story of these people that succeeded in killing you. The story of these bodies that destroyed you. The story of your body will accuse the political history. And it's quite unbelievable. And maybe if you could talk to us a little about one of these people, Martin Hughes, one of those responsible for your father, wrote a book called, I'm not sure, How I Killed Your Father. It was a book, interesting book. It's kind of a response. So in 2017, also, a French journalist, Hervé Algala-Rondeau, published another book called Two French Youths, Deux Jeunesses Françaises, Macron and Édouard Louis, because they were born in the same region. So these are parallel lives. It seems that your reaction, these reactions talk about the impact of your action. It seems to be good, right? You're causing a lot of impact. Good work you have done there.
Ça va? Ok. Oui, c'est drôle d'ailleurs. Enfin, c'est pas drôle.
Well, it's kind of funny, but well, it's horrible. Actually, it's not funny. But when Martin Hirsch, he was a minister of Sarkozy. When I published my book, he didn't even try to say Édouard Louis is lying, because normally that's what my enemies say. But he said, "Oh yeah, it's true. Yeah, we did reforms in order to have people going back to work, because it's a way of respecting them." So he didn't even try to say or deny what I said. He said, "Yeah, actually, yeah, that's exactly what we did. We have to make people go back to work." Because we know it's not only in France, this new liberal reform that will actually tear down those that are poor and to go back to work, whatever the price. This happened in Germany, in England. Kate Noche made a film. It's called Moi, Daniel Blake, the story of a poor man, and the English state makes him go back to work, and then he has a cardiac arrest. And so it was a type of a discipline, a neoliberal discipline on a worldwide basis of dealing with popular classes, poorer classes. So when these people are manifesting themselves, I tell myself that it's, well, actually I say, you know what, I did good. They were forced to listen to what I had to say. And these are people that don't want to see this. Very frequently, what I say is that I try to do a literature of confrontation that will produce controversy. And for many years, the idea in literature was that the role of literature would be to show reality you do not know. So the books of Steinbeck, of Émile Zola, Jean-Paul Sartre, these are books that will say we're going to show the life of the working classes in mines, in factories, and in doing so, we will try to produce some kind of reaction. This is what Sartre and Beauvoir call engaged literature. But what I believe in is that in the 21st century, everybody already knows what is the reality. Everybody knows that there is class inequality, that there is male dominance, there are social clashes, and all the women that are killed by men in France every day. Everybody knows that this we have access to this. We have internet, we have social networks, we have TV. So the role of literature is not as much as to tell a story about something. It is a role of trying to force the public to see something that they already know, but they don't want to see. And this is what I call confrontational literature. It is formal literature. For many years, there was this opposition between political literature, Sartre, Beauvoir, and many others, and then the formal literature of Clotilde, Marguerite Duras, and many others. So a confrontational literature is something that is formal and political, because you will ask yourself, how are we able to reinvent the literary format so that those who do not wish to see the world will actually see the world? Whenever we have ministers and political men that attack me, they saw me, they were forced to be confronted, because of course they know everything. They see people that talk about poverty and everything. Well, I'm not teaching them anything, but I just force them to see me. So to write a literature, not that will produce freedom, as the bourgeoisie normally says, but a literature that will suspend liberty for a couple of seconds, for a couple of pages, to force people to see things that they don't want to see. This is a literature that will bring many consequences. We talk about the consequence, public and political consequences. And of course, there is a personal consequence. True, your family was a bit pissed with the books you wrote, with very strong and extreme reactions. Your brother probably went to Paris to try to, with a baseball bat, to try and hit you and beat you up. Your mother, your father were rebel against your writings. But at a given moment, this is very complex. So at a given moment, and who killed my father, you write, many times I'm under the impression that I love you. You talk about your father. In A Woman's Battles and Transformations, and in Monique Sévade, there's this change in the relation with the mother, our coming together again. When we got closer together, it changed her future, but it changed also our past. Do you think that at a given level you can talk about reconciliation, maybe? Can you talk about a reconciliation between things that are irreconcilable? Can you talk about reconciliation from the personal standpoint and also in a more broader sense?
Non, pas vraiment, non. Non. Non.
No, actually, no. No, because there are certain things that cannot be reconciled. There are certain things that are more objective. Actually, what I try to do in my books is to retell this objective divorce and not subjective divorces. In literature, there are many stories of subjective divorces. We talk about how we no longer love someone, we're no longer in love with someone, when we separate from someone, we're no longer loved by someone, so we allow ourselves to die. Lots of literature that talks about that. But what I try to tell is another story, is divorce that is not of choice, separation that we did not choose, but it's a separation that is objectively produced by a social world. And this is why reconciliation is difficult, and this is why we tell the story of people that have changed social classes, as Annie Arnaud, James Baldwin, as Audre Lorde was done, Jamaica Kincaid. This is what it is not to be able to talk to your father, to talk to your mother, not because we no longer wish to talk to them, but because we do not speak the same language, you don't have the same body, we no longer can think. We don't have the same way of seeing the world. And the book about my mother, Monique Sevad, when I was a child, there was the doctor, the village doctor, would come to our house. He was the only person that would come from a privileged mean that we actually were able to see because he studied, he was a doctor, he had studied for many years, he lived in the city, he read books. And then I remember that when I was a kid, when someone was sick, when the doctor would go into that house, there was such a violence that was produced. It was an enormous violence because when compared to him, we thought that we didn't know how to speak, that we spoke with an accent, that we spoke too loud, that he had nice teeth and we had bad, we were not well dressed and he was well dressed. But actually, it was someone that was very nice. He was very kind to us. But it was not a matter of decision, just a matter of his being there in our house for us to feel that violence. It was an objective violence. It was a social class against another social class. And what I see now, when I see my father or my mother, I have become the body that humiliated me. I have become the body of humiliation. And when I see my mother, even if we have a very good relation between us, I see that there's still an enormous violence. My mother is more careful in terms of how she sits and speaks. She's stressed whenever I come to her. And it's a social stress. It's a class stress. So I am the violent body. And we can never go above this. We try. I try with my mother, especially because with my father, I don't talk to him anymore because he voted for the extreme right on the last election, so I never forgave him. And he voted against me, against my body, against who I am, and publicly he said that. So we broke. But my mother, I still try, but there's this subjective violence. At a given moment in Monique Sevad, where your mother is leaving the house of the second man she lived after your father, and then you know that he is also violent against her. And then you look at that man and say, surprisingly enough, I don't hate him. He said that man was not guilty or accountable for what happened, but he was just the body that conducted this violence. So a person that will reproduce the world surrounding him. He's not someone that will create or anything or drive anything. He's just a vehicle. And this man, you call him innocent, and not in the matter of not being guilty. What innocence is this that you say that the generalized condition? There is this innocence in the conduction of violence.
Absolument. Oui, c'est une idée de Franz Kafka.
Yes, it's Franz Kafka used to say that we are all innocent.
On est tous innocents.
We're all innocent.
Vous voyez, quand une mère, par exemple,
when a mother, for instance, have a child that commits a crime, she will always try to find a reason to justify. She will try to forgive, say, no, it's more complicated than that. He made bad friendships during his life. He had his dreams were shattered. And very frequently we have the story as a blindness. We say, well, actually, she's blind because it's her own son. maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the fact that we come close to these people, we all of a sudden understand that people are innocent. It doesn't mean that what they did is good, that it's condemnable. It's not that we will go against them, but there is a conceptual level, theoretical level. There's always this sort of innocence. But I should also compare this with what I was saying just now. I believe also that there is a difference between the dominant class and those who are being under the dominant class. The dominant class is always responsible. We don't have the same level of innocence or accountability. And it's strange, actually, because when I published my first book, The End of Eddie and the Story of Violence, History of Violence, where I talk about homophobia, racism, male dominance in the life of my childhood, and I always say, I want to understand this violence. I want to excuse, try to justify it. Where does it come from? And I remember that moment journalists attacked me by saying, you can't try to understand because the violence is, when someone is violent, it's their fault. And I was attacked because I said that. And when I published Who Killed My Father, well, I talked about the violence of government, of Sarkozy, of Chirac, and this and that. The same people that said that there's always someone responsible, the same journalists said, you can't say that they are responsible, it's not their fault, it's the institution, it's the European Union, it's the cabinet, it's the big factories that are behind this. So it's the same people. So in their minds, those who are the dominant ones are never responsible, but it's the other way around, because when you have an understanding of the world, of privileges, that you have studied, you read books, you traveled, you learned the book through literature, you have a responsibility that is greater than that, because you know the world better, you have better understanding. So when they exercise something violently, they are responsible. I believe that Bolsonaro is responsible, Chirac is responsible, Macron is responsible, Biden is responsible, Netanyahu is responsible. These people are responsible for the violence but my father is not responsible. It's not the same thing.
Em lutas e metamorfoses de uma mulher, em determinado momento você fala tudo que eu quero.
A woman's battles and transformations, you say, the only thing I want is to write the same story over and over, to go back to it until I'm able to reveal fragments of its truth, and to the extent that whatever is hidden will once again come to light. What is the set of books? And you also said publicly, you said that you will no longer write about your family. But it seems that reading, we see many things, but maybe if you could try to formulate, what is the set of book? What did this reveal to you? To us, many things, but how about you? What does this reveal to you? That's very kind of you. Thank you.
Ça m'a révélé beaucoup de choses.
Yes, many things were revealed to me. One of the things that were revealed to me, I guess, is everyone tries to escape. And this, before I didn't know. When I was a child, a teenager, a gay teenager in a poor environment, and I tried to escape, I had this idea that I wanted to escape, but others didn't want to escape. There was this arrogance. There was this class that would say, I am someone that will leave, and they don't want to leave. And then for many years I had this idea, I would say my brother, my father, they don't want to change their lives. But I was wrong. I was wrong. What I tell in all my books is that This is sort of an anthropology of the escape. It was an attempt of fleeing in almost human conditions, of those that tried to escape all the time. And Who Killed My Father, I tried to tell how my father tried to escape to the south of France. He doesn't have money to do so, so he goes back to the north to work in factories. He drank a lot because he thought that he was able to escape through alcohol, that he would forget his life, his pain, his sadness. And my brother died at 38. My mother also tried to escape. So it's as if there are these bodies that are trying to escape in all directions. Except that there are bodies that when they try to escape, it's there that they die. And this new book is called L'Effondrement. It's a story of a person that tries to escape in every and each way possible. And this is why he died. My brother tried to kill me many times. He was very violent. And this violence was a way of trying to recover some kind of power of his life in France, in Brazil, in the US. Those who are violent, especially boys, because normally the boys men are violent. And when they are violent, these are the people that had nothing in their lives. We took everything from them. So they go on the streets, they try to find the power they never had. So in trying to do this, they will die younger, they will be in prison, they will be killed in a gang war. So there are those who try to escape in every way, and there are others that are unable to do this, but they try. And this is something I didn't understand before. And I was talking about Kafka just now. I love writers that try to understand in a certain way one aspect of human nature. For instance, the guy who is closed in power and administration. Samuel Beckett tried to understand the individual who is aging, that is unable to move anymore. So what interests me, the person that tries to escape, the person that tries to escape or dies trying to escape. So this is it. So this is how we reach the end of our round table.
Édouard Louis.
Édouard Louis.